Alright, I'm presenting on the German Naval Forces, and Type 9B was very effective for night attacks. It had 6 torpedo tubes and was used mostly to attack convoys at night, and then after attacking they would pull back.
This is one. Don't shoot. Yeah.
Oh, and then here's a picture of the 9B. These were the best pictures I could get, though I know they're not great quality.
Can you go back to all the information about it?
Is that like a machine gun on top, and why would it have?
Wait one second.
Where's the tower? What?
That looks like a.
That's like a, I don't want to say radar tower, but that's essentially what it is, you know?
Not the
Like,
crane tower thing next.
Is that camouflage on the top of it?
Yeah.
oh,
That's
this?
so cool.
Yeah.
Yes, that is. Well, you know what we're having for dinner tonight? Can I go? Or
Yeah.
no?
It's just a picture.
Okay. And so this is the Type 7A. Oh, and also the 9B was the best of its class. So this is 7A, and it was... it had four torpedo tubes up top and then one in the back. It was powered by a very powerful engine. It had 2100 or 2300 horsepower, and it would go like 470 RPM, and then it was propelled by the electric motor, giving it 750 horsepower when it was under the water. Oh, and then it had a quick firing gun on top of the deck like the other one. So they all pretty much have the same configuration like this one. And that's it moored in the docks along with some other submarines. Sorry. So this is the Type 21, and it was the first submarine to operate to be mostly submerged rather than to be dual above water and below water. All the submarines were also great for night attacks. They traveled submerged about 9.13 kilometers for 2 or 3 days before recharging. So, and how far they could travel and how fast they could travel, that was pretty amazing. And then since it was so high tech, and since it was if you kept it clean, it would actually go faster. Keep it clear of barnacles and such, because that would actually reduce its speed. And if you had enough, it could significantly reduce its speed. The new hull design, though, was visible to others, like destroyers, carriers, whatever. So it had less camouflage, I guess, visibility. I don't know how to describe it. And then it could fire 18 torpedoes in under 20 minutes. And so this is the 21.
How many torpedoes were fired?
18 in under 20 minutes. Yeah. Oh, and they had 6 torpedo tubes. Wait, am I going the wrong way?
What,
Yes.
keep it where you just were.
Here?
Your second point at the end says it gave the boat a sprint ability when positioning itself for an attack. Can you describe that?
Where?
Last.
Bottom of the second point.
Oh, so when it positioned itself, it could pretty much sprint. So over long distances, it would maintain a certain speed, but the whole design made it so that it could sprint for or go faster for shorter distances. So essentially, for runners to sprint, instead of a mile, you would go faster for a
How much
100-yard
faster
dash.
do you know, approximately?
I don't know, they would change each time, motors, how the hull was designed, so it really all depended. I can't say exactly, but I'm guessing maybe 14 kilometers instead of 9.13, so something around that. And then onto the carriers is the The first one is the Graf Zeppelin. It had 42 fighters and bombers. It was 262.5 meters long. It had 4 turbines with 16 boilers. The power, it was mostly based off its aircraft. Obviously, it did have some defenses, but since it's an aircraft carrier, it was primarily created to carry aircraft, ironically enough.
That's a lot of officers, 1,760 officers and enlisted men.
Yeah.
Plus, like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you
And
No,
that's
look
probably
at the
like-
speed that had a top speed of 34 knots. That's wicked fast.
And for an aircraft carrier too, with all that weight,
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
especially for that's fast for now.
that's even
way
faster
for
than
that.
the submarines, because the submarines were going like 9.13, and this is going almost 3 times that. No, it's going more than 3 times that. And it had 16 millimeters for armor.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that good?
16 millimeters or something?
6D. 16. And then here's a picture of it. This is just it in the water, and then that's its schematics. So much fun saying that.
signs haven't changed in surely years.
They don't just
It's
carry
not as
aircraft, they
wide,
carry
though.
the fuel. They
Yeah.
have to
Well,
let
yeah,
you
but-
refuel, so that adds
So-
even more weight.
Aircraft are stored up top, and then you'll see along
Yeah.
the side. You see the giant ports on the sides. They have elevators on the sides, so they can lower aircraft down and then move them into the inside of the aircraft carrier, and that's where they refuel them and rearm them.
What?
And then they could
And
just like
that's
recycle.
huge.
Yeah.
Today's
Did you have-
aircraft carriers are huge.
They're
Like the ones
Like
in
a
Captain
city
America
block,
that
One in-
like
in
fly.
New York, I was surprised how many.
Yeah.
Probably
levels
And then
bigger.
get
Bigger than
invisible.
that.
Yeah.
Well, I know my
Whole
cousin
village.
was he's a
Jacobson.
nuclear engine operator for the Navy. He was put on the George H.W. Bush's second newest aircraft carrier we have, and it is well over 2 football fields long.
That's
And
insane.
It's so. I mean, just for PT in the morning, they'll go run laps around the aircraft carrier.
All right, before lunch,
there-
we have a 2-lap
Is
jog.
there a square footage or anything for this? Like how big it is? Did you
I
have that in your
don't
information?
think so.
Literally, if you can think of an
263 meters long. You're talking about
That's the
almost,
closest, but not square
600
feet.
feet.
more.
I'm
It's
horrible at
times
calculating
3, so
square feet.
So modern aircraft carriers
It's like
aren't even much longer
750
than that.
feet long.
So they were pretty advanced.
Yeah.
That's in
But
itself
ironically
meters
enough, they
without the
didn't
yards.
have a
That's
lot.
2.5 football fields. Right
But
there.
when did aircraft carriers like emerge into like armed forces? Is this like when they're developing them? Or?
I'm assuming it's right,
I
like,
know
at least
the
quickly
US
after they
had-
developed them.
And Japanese were
Yeah.
fighting with them throughout World War II. And I'm sure Germany had the technology, probably even before they did.
But I'm sure they were like designing them while like more
By the
aircraft
time-
was being, you know,
Are you asking,
Engineering.
were they designed before the war or during the war?
I'm
How
just
far
saying, if
back
this
it
is
goes.
pretty high tech, is this, after trying, and is this a relatively new, like, invention? Obviously, like,
Relatively.
it's only around since the airplane, but
After World War One,
Yeah,
is
Yeah.
what she's
during
asking.
World War One, they would put like 1 or 2 planes on certain aircraft, on certain ships that they would put on a rail, and they'd be able to launch them off of this rail.
kind of
But
like
you would
with,
get 1 or 2 planes per ship, and they were scout aircraft. So it kind
Real
of gives
light.
you an over.
Yeah.
They were ultra light. They would give you an overlay of the sea around you because they didn't have
they
radar.
were photographing.
basically.
Okay.
the benefit to having like carriers is that they could do like really quick launches. So like
yeah,
Pearl
like,
Harbor, like
I was
you know,
about
where
to say
there are
that,
like
yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of islands, you can just send a carrier and like the planes will have to.
You send a
go
carrier
list.
with something.
Yeah,
Carriers
I mean-
never by itself.
obviously,
With
but
the
I meant like
planes.
you know, it's essentially
no,
the same.
it
Just
always
like
has
launch.
other ships around it because it's basically like a bomber.
It's full of fuel.
Yeah,
Yeah, but it's basically
Match.
like a bomber. It's big, it's slow, but you get little scout planes or something around it, you could easily blow it up because they can't shoot them down. you have other ships around it that take out enemy
That are like
ships.
defense.
This stays back and sends off its planes.
But I
They
realize
were
that, but I
incredibly
was,
effective
yeah.
when protected. For instance, during World War II, the United States only had one aircraft carrier that survived Pearl Harbor. It was out on a patrol that it wasn't supposed to be on.
Right, it was off the
But
grounds.
anyways, so we engaged in the Pacific Front with one aircraft carrier the entire war, pretty much. We
And
were
it
able to patch
survived?
up a couple of others, but well, that's the other thing is we had other naval ships that we used to protect it.
also
But
we had a lot
aircraft
of
carriers were the major turning point in all naval conflicts in World War II. That's how the Japanese were able to bomb Pearl Harbor. Was from I think they had 3 aircraft carriers that they sent planes off.
But
of.
that's
Because
the
it's
Pacific
basically a
front.
floating island.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
You know,
Yeah.
instead
It's-
of
it's a
having a
floating
flight from
airfield.
Japan
Right,
to
totally.
America, you're taking your landing strip closer
Think of
to your
when
target.
you go to the airport. Like I know some of us are going to be flying somewhere on spring break. Take the airport and put it on a ship.
Mhm.
That's basically what an aircraft
That's
carrier
true.
is.
That's
But
true. That's
so
a that's
much
a good
shorter.
picture.
And I'm amazed, like,
No, they're actually not.
At the
Like
They're not that
Dulles,
short.
Dulles.
but
You
like,
know how wide it
most
is, that
planes
first-
have to have a really long runway.
Then the planes on
Today's
aircraft
like
carriers are much smaller
aircrafts,
though, too.
we have these jets that just
The con-
like shoot them off. But with these planes, they were only propeller. It's amazing that they were able to like get off so easily.
They especially make the
That's true.
airplanes for these. And I was reading in I have a book on it's mostly the Pacific, but it's talking about the Navy. And they said a lot of the airplanes, their biggest danger wasn't actually fighting, it was getting back on the aircraft.
yeah, that's what I
Because
was.
landing on things,
Is
that
that
thing is
true?
almost impossible.
Like,
Yes.
have you seen Hunt for Red October? Like any of you?
Yes.
That entire scene when he was just like flashing back or whatever, like that would happen a lot, and that was probably like the biggest danger of all the aircraft. But if you could land safely, it was very effective.
Yeah.
So they would
remember-
only choose like the best pilots to like land on aircrafts.
And
Remember
they
in Pearl
practice a
Harbor, they
lot.
had to keep like throwing out parts and like making it lighter and lighter so it could actually like make the launch at the end of the carrier. Do you
And if
remember
you don't
the
catch that.
movie?
Did they have that back then? I'm pretty sure they did.
They started to introduce it, but a lot of times they had to land on it and stop before they
So, yeah.
That'd be
Go
interesting.
ahead.
without the hook catching.
Yeah.
So this is the,
Scharnhorst.
and it's a battleship. It was completed in '39, and it had a 928 centimeter.
28 centimeters.
You know what I mean?
That is about
You could crawl up and
Four
down
to-
these tubes.
that's about 4 times the size of those tanks. I mean,
Well, again, they are designed to put holes in aircraft carriers and things of that
Right.
sort. So,
but it's just you saw the size of the tanks.
yeah,
That is humongous.
if you hit a tank with one of those, it's like they burn.
Well, they weren't
us.
fighting tanks.
No, but my point is like
The size of the gun.
the artillery round is getting close to the size of the head of the tank.
Yeah.
So it's
This battleship has like more than 40 guns on it alone. I mean, obviously it's a battleship, but that's a lot of guns, especially with the size, how many they have.
like I know I used to get confused between destroyers and battleships because I know the names are pretty similar. Like
Destroyer,
you would
battleship.
think destroyers though were specifically they were smaller. They were made to take out submarines. It's still today that's what they do is they are anti-submarine ships. Whereas battleships are the floating fortresses, which are in some cases bigger than the aircraft carriers. And they've got a whole vast arrays of anti-aircraft weapons and anti-ship weapons and anti-landing craft weapons. And
Can one of you get us on either a battleship or an aircraft carrier as a
I
class?
don't do Navy stuff.
Ironically
Is that an
enough,
army
Connection.
thing?
Know somebody that knows somebody.
Do you have
that
contacts,
I
Jacob?
have some connection with it.
Does your dad have connections with any Navy guys?
Gabe,
Yeah,
you're like, wait
but-
1 second.
In Alaska, so I don't know
Oh.
if it counts.
You go
We
see-
should try to go visit a ship in true life because one thing is to see slides and to hear
What's the
sizes.
place on the way down to
You're
Virginia
right when
Beach?
you're in it and you're like,
No.
Norfolk is like
No,
this
no.
huge base.
That.
Or you can
We
go up to
stayed there for a
Annapolis.
while.
Annapolis.
They'll give you tours up there.
Let's go to Annapolis. It's a fun town.
They'll give you tours up there.
Yeah, Annapolis. We sailed to Annapolis a lot.
Yeah, we'll sail on your boat and then look and get on a battleship. We could just put guns on your boat.
The key is to keep it World War II. We want to see a vessel from that time.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely couldn't help you there. I might be able to help with like a modern.
The battleships were
I like your
another.
idea, Gabe.
The battleships were another battle turning, like just like the aircraft carriers, they were your main armaments. It's like your tanks of the sea battles. So it was,
The
A
tanks of the
portable
sea.
battlefield.
yeah, it was. I mean,
Or
the
a
aircraft
ship.
carriers had the planes, but they couldn't do
So
anything by
hard.
themselves. The battleships were the ones destroying the other ships. So the aircraft carriers would take out small ships or even kill the men off the decks.
So
Well, they
Andrew and
could
Jacob are giving a
penetrate-
They
very
could drop
general
like- they
overview
could
of
drop
like
bombs.
everything.
Keep going.
But that was a relatively crude method of fighting back
Yeah,
then. They
the
didn't have
blueprints
good
for
guidance.
the
Looks like you gotta
Battleships were-
focus that again. Is it true? Is it a little blurry?
And
think it's just
I think
the
the
picture.
photo, yeah.
yeah the photos for these are really bad quality. I tried getting them, but
So you can see how small those airplanes are compared
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's true.
to the battleship.
from
I mean,
here
if they
to
got
here,
hit by one of those
it's like
guns,
all just guns.
Yeah, the
well,
airplanes.
It's like you walk.
called a battleship.
They would do things, dive bombing. They could do
Yeah.
that, but it would take a bunch of their bombs to not even get or whatever the airplanes carried to take out, even
Yeah.
make a hole in the ship.
They would have to focus on certain key points of the ship.
Like the,
Maybe
the
the
radio
engine.
communication.
Yeah, you'd
Or
go
the
for the
fuel.
control towers, or
Yeah, the fuel.
you would drop them on the exhaust towers, because if you could clog up a ship's engines, you couldn't go anywhere.
Also, although I don't have it in the Navy per se, because it's a little fuzzy, but in that book, do you remember there was a guy called a Frogman?
Yes.
Yeah. So what they would do is they would take mines and literally go swim underneath the boats and then place mines on it and then swim away. So like sometimes they would even just like the planes would fly and then they would just like jump out. Like planes would slow down enough so that they could like still like be in the air and be close enough to the water that the guys could just jump off and then they would swim. And like
That's your Navy SEAls.
yeah,
But-
but
But
These guys
are
are hardcore.
what do you call them? What do you call the bomb squad on land? The ones that have to defuse a bomb. They had the same. That's he's
Yeah,
talking
the
about the
SWAT team?
frogmen being like the SEAls type of
The other thing
qualified
is, I
bomb
said they had
specialists.
some of these battleships had anti-landing craft weapons on them because they were specially made for shooting, landing crafts. Because in
How
some
fast is
cases
that
they will
one
send landing craft
Which one?
over to do just that.
The
and launch
Scharnhorst?
weapons
The battle.
on ships because a
This
lot
one?
of the bigger guns and anti-aircraft guns couldn't do anything to the landing craft. Aircraft guns wouldn't aim far down enough on their pivots, and the giant guns would shoot over it by the time you got close enough to see them.
And if your thickest armor is expecting that you're going to be attacked this way, you've got to come and swim and attach things to the hull where they least expect it.
so like
Well,
the
what
first
these people would have,
I'm
if
guessing
you're in a
that's
landing
around
craft, if you're like that super desperate, you're going to be putting stuff on the back of a ship near the propellers. But that's going to be. They had
Without getting your
interesting
head chopped
tactics.
off.
Well, no, you would say in the landing craft. It was kind of crazy. I don't know if you guys have read how they would actually do it, but they would mount ropes and whatnot, like using all sorts of different mechanisms.
Just to get
Rope onto the side of the ship to be able to tie off the boat, and then they'd be able to open the front door and then literally, you'd have the landing craft bouncing against the side of the, battleship at the end. So I mean, if anything came loose, you were getting sucked into the
to the wake.
propulsion system, which was not going to be
pretty.
a memorable experience.
Keep going, Jonathan.
It would be a memorable experience. So this is the
Needs to know.
thank you, and its speed was 31.3 knots, and like the other one, it had a lot of the same guns. I think there are like a couple different variations depending on like the captain and what they wanted, but I think for the most part it was the same. And then it had around 1,800 men, 1,840 men on the ship.
So if you stay on the slide, I'm looking at it saying that there were 10 2-centimeter anti-aircraft guns, and that was eventually increased to 38.
Yeah, 38
That's an additional 28 additional anti-aircraft guns.
Yeah.
First of all, those are pretty big. If the 2-centimeter round, if that hits your aircraft, it's one hit and you're gone, especially with these naval aircraft that are designed lighter. The other thing is that shows that they were obviously recognizing the threat of aircraft carriers.
And since the USA like had a ton of aircraft, it was very efficient, I'm sure.
And they were on the propeller aircraft.
Yeah.
Propeller gone.
And these are all German,
Did
right?
the German, I mean, in the last, one of the recent Map of History things that you had us watch, they were talking about how the ships were engaging in the Atlantic, but was there even that much action between them and us, or was it mainly World War II wise, just Japan and us in the Pacific?
Well, I think it was
mostly
like
Britain and
Oh, that's true,
and
Germany, right.
What you saw, which was a little surprising, is how close their U-boats were getting to America.
Yeah, it was like Cuba.
But then again, like they were designed to be like almost like you couldn't see them, especially if they were traveling at night, and they could go deep enough that like almost nothing could like sound. So now we have like sonar buoys and like pings and all this high tech stuff, but they didn't have that. So actually getting close to like our coast wasn't that impressive because we didn't have the technology.
But the fact
to
that we
detect
found them is impressive because
Yeah.
we didn't have that
that's why
technology.
they created the Civil Air Patrol. Because no joke, because
Uh-huh.
submarines were
To
coming
keep
to
their
I know.
nose
yeah.
open, yeah.
Like actually, one of my friends is like a captain or something in that, and it's really
And
Just
everyday youth, my mother-in-law was trained as a
to
teenager
know what kind
to
of plane
keep
is
her-
an enemy aircraft.
her
She
turn
knew
at
the
watch
silhouettes.
and know what she's looking for.
So this had 30 knots, pretty much, and then it had more than 1,000 enlisted men staying on there. They were divided into 12 divisions, and then just like the other two, this also had a lot of armaments. But I think this one, since it had more men and was a little bit bigger than the others, it had more guns. So
3 radars.